Shout out to Snowball, our incredible new sponsor, a private community where top entrepreneur investors share private deal flow, wins, tough lessons, strategies, get advice, and so much more. Check out www.snowballclub.com. Let's grow together with Snowball. Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Richard Tunnah, and we're going to talk about his life in the mergers and acquisitions world. He's created multiple businesses, he's sold them, and actually helps other people do some of that. So thank you today, Richard, for being here from across the pond. Actually, you're on the opposite side of the planet. Well, maybe not the total opposite. I don't know what the opposite side of California would be.
Thank you for having me.
At least you're at least halfway across the planet, right? So
yeah, something like that. Across a bit of water, a lot of water.
Cool. I think we have the same weather as you. Usually, if I think of London, I think of overcast, like a little fog and maybe a little misty rain. And I
Yes.
live in the redwood forest, so we got the same thing going on here in the last couple of weeks. So at least we have the same weather, outside.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's.
Yeah. Exactly.
I always like to start with the origin story. Kind of, how did you get into mergers and acquisition? What made you come down this path? I joke around all the time and say, "Hey, you were born," and then you ended up on a show about buying and selling businesses. How did you end up
Hmm.
here?
Yeah. I mean, my story is an interesting story. I mean, I left school with no qualifications. I struggled for the first 10 years of my life. Had very bad asthma and eczema and was in and out of hospital. At 15, my mother sent me for some English extra lessons, much to my disdain. And the lady said, "Well, you're struggling because you're dyslexic." And no one had said that to me. So, yeah, I left school at 16, really didn't have any qualifications, went into retail, worked in some high-end men's clothes shops, worked my way up in a business. It got acquired by American business. This was Principles, which was a big chain in the UK of clothes for men and women. And at the time, it was very good. I was a manager, moved my way up from a 17-year-old up to a manager. And they worked out that it was better to have 4 part-time managers working 10 hours or less for tax and all those good thing reasons. So they turned around to me and said, "We don't want you doing 40 hours. We want to do in 10 hours. We can give you some redundancy if you want to do that." And I said, "No, I'll take the full redundancy. Thank you. I've been here 4.5 years. It's got a nice bit of lump sum." And then my plan was to go back into working for someone else. And I met up with a friend of mine, and he said, "I've got an idea to do something." This was 93. And we set up a online classified site, not unlike Craigslist or Gumtree. And we allowed people to post throughout the world under sections their ad free. But we wanted them to pay to be at the top of the listings. Now, I don't know if you remember those times, Ronald, in the early 90s on the internet. It was a crazy time. I mean, we were paying, I'll give you an idea. I mean, my phone bill at the time was about £700, so over $1,000 probably equivalent, because I was paying per megabyte, believe it or not, or kilobyte, I think actually it was at the time. And my hosting was, I think that was about £500 a month. My domain name, I think they were £150 to £200 a year. And we went to our local bank and said, "Oh, we want to take credit cards online, want to take payments so people can upgrade." and they can have it at the top of the listing. And they laughed us out of the bank. They said, internet, it's all a scam, never catch on, we're not touching that. We're not interested in providing you a merchant account to get credit cards online. So we looked around a few of the banks, and pretty much that was the same everywhere. They just weren't interested. They laughed us out, said, we're not supporting that. It's a fad, all the rest of it. And eventually we hooked up with a new company called WorldPay, which is a huge company now taking payments online. And I think at the time they accepted us because they were new, but we were paying, I think, about 39% of each in transaction fees. So we were getting killed on the transaction
Yeah.
fees.
I remember
You
those days. I remember those days. Yeah.
I mean, it was either we either worked with them or we couldn't take payments online. And I mean, this was at the time where everything was sort of very slow anyway. So we wanted a simple process to do that. And we worked that for a couple of years. And then we decided we'd take an exit out of that at a very early stage. And then we moved into web design. This was in the later 90s, when actually we could charge about £5,000 we were charging a very simple website, probably something you can do on Squarespace now or something equivalent, to be honest. But we had a coder that was hand coding each website with simple pictures, etc. And our clientele was sort of the luxury end. It was people that wanted to be seen and jump in on this new internet thing that was prevailing. So we did that for a few years. And then we exited that. And then I saw an opportunity to sell on eBay end of line designer t shirts. And I used to buy in bulk from DKNY and Ralph Lauren t shirts. And then I would flip them on eBay and make my margins. And that was a very good business for about 18 months. It got more competitive because people saw what I was doing. And then I exited that and moved into consulting businesses to grow. Worked on that a couple of years, exited that, and then moved on to consulting with in terms of getting published in books and getting your name out there. So brand, really, or personal branding. Worked with that for a couple of years and exited that. And then about eight and a half years ago, I met a former investment banker who said to me, why don't you start acquiring businesses and input your skill set into these businesses? Because you've obviously got quite a history of skill set. And me, like most people I chat to today, said, well, isn't that only for the multi-billionaires and the PEs with huge pockets, etc.? And he said, no, no. And we acquired some businesses. Most recently, I've just exited a security company that we acquired. We acquired it probably at the worst time ever, this security business. We acquired it and completed on the 20th of February 2020. People know in the UK, in March, our government went into complete lockdown. This was a consultancy business. We worked with a lot of high profile banks and government agencies going in and checking their security. And suddenly we couldn't do that. So we had to pivot to helping them work remotely, basically to just have a business. And thankfully we managed to do that, get back up again. And then an investor that came in made me an offer for my equity stake and exited June, I think it was, of last year. So that's kind of so I've seen this journey from a few different points of view, to be honest. Starting off with the bootstrapping, which is, I was in my early 20s when I started, but it's certainly not an easy route to take, I would say. And taking the early exits, on those, and then acquiring slightly bigger companies, and then looking at building on those, and then exiting. So that's kind of my journey, I guess.
And if you're like me, there's probably a half a dozen businesses that were ideas you kind of put a little time and energy to in the middle there that just never took off, didn't get product market fit. We always talk about the ones that grew and sold because they took up years of our time, but we rarely
Yes.
talk about hey, I tried this for 3 months. I couldn't get anybody to like it. right? And
Oh, there's a few, Ronald. I mean, I remember one after the clothes business, I decided that there was a market on eBay for refurbished TVs. And I started getting that, but I realized very quickly the problem with that was that the capacity, I had capacity on my property at the time to put the t-shirts, but when you're talking about TV, even though they were much smaller in those days, a 32-inch TV, if you've got 100 of those,
Yep.
and then you need space for delivery, etc. So yeah, I've certainly had things that I've tried and realized, hey, there's going to be some issues here in scaling, etc. And I realized quickly that I needed a fairly big, easy access warehouse. And at that point, it was going to eat up quite a lot of my profit margin before I made any
Right.
money. So that was a quick in and out, unfortunately.
So having so many exits, what did you learn in the first, couple that like kind of walk us through the lessons learned? I'm sure there are things you did in the first time you sold a company that you're like, okay, I'm never doing that again. So what were some of the lessons learned?
I think forward planning. This is something I always talk to people that say to me, "Oh, I'm thinking of selling business." I said, "Well, okay, have you planned this exit?" Because we know that the worst exit is the exit that has to happen because of health, divorce, etc.
Hmm.
And I think I was guilty on the first one of not preparing the exit, not having the facts and figures there, of laying it all out. So I didn't maximize my exit. I'll be honest, and I got better at that as I went on. And now, from the other side, I understand completely the importance of that. And maybe I didn't really understand the importance in my 20s. And hey, why do they need all the bank accounts all lined up? Why do they need to know everything?
Right. One of the things that a lot of the first time sellers run into is by the time they sell it, they're either burned out or there's a driving reason for them to sell. And they get in this realm of indifference because they're at the where they don't I don't wanna say they don't care, but they're at the point where they're gonna shut this thing down, and they're only selling it because it's a better option than shutting it down, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that plays to our side on the buyer's side, of course,
yeah,
but it does it in the realm that if they, say a sale doesn't happen overnight, it takes months, if not, a year or 2 sometimes. And if you look
mm,
at the revenue and all the other,
mm,
you can see that in difference on a chart. You can actually see things starting to drop over time, and that just
absolutely.
it's really hard to sell that. I looked at probably 4 or 5 companies last year that were trying to sell where the owners are burned out, and it's hard to buy something in a declining market, especially a lot of times they're going in a declining market. I'm trying to put my hand in the camera here. The market's going like this, and the competitiveness is going here. So you've been
Yeah,
indifferent and starting to go down. Other people are seeing it and making it work. So now there's more competitors than you had. And it's just
yeah,
hard as a buyer to look at like, you did this for 10 years. I don't, what makes me think I'm going to come in, buy your
mm,
company, do better than you did against a more
mm,
competitive environment than
mm,
you had.
mm.
And that's a hard story to sell. That's
I
what we're
hear it all
buying.
the time, Ronald. I hear it all the time. I mean, I had conversations with a seller that I think I first had conversation 7 years ago, and it was overflated in price, and had a very
Mm,
blunt conversation with him. The business is terrible in terms of cash flow. It's an import business, but he inputs significant money, 7 figures plus an overdraft. So for about 10 months of the year, that business is a negative equity. And I said to him, I said, this is going to be a real hard sell. I mean, your revenue, your bottom line looks good, but when people look at the hard business that you're doing, you've got 10 months of the year, we've got no revenue. You've got either money out in China producing the product, or you're waiting on 240 invoices with the big supermarket chains in the UK and Europe to pay you. I said, that's a big issue.
yeah, I've looked at a few of those where they're direct to consumer and they make most of their money between Thanksgiving and Christmas. They're gift-based companies, and the 8 months leading up to that, they're building up their inventory and everything, and they're negative, negative, negative. I said, "They have such a cyclical business," and they're trying to sell it to you in January. right?
Yeah,
So the
exactly.
slow cycle, and it's slow from January until like this particular one I was thinking of was slow between January and like I want to say June or July. It almost drops off to
Mm,
nothing, and they're like because they're
yeah.
spending all their money building up inventory for Thanksgiving, and there's trickle sales, but not enough to even pay staff. So
No,
if you look
no.
at the end of the year, they were profitable, but you're
Mm,
trying to sell they're wanting to sell me a company and walk away with the cash that's currently in the bank, and they don't understand that that cash is required to cycle through the rest of the year, right?
that was my
And,
problem. I mean, I looked at this business and I looked, okay, can I do a letter of credit? Okay, then can I do invoice financing? But then I'm looking at the margins and thinking, well, we all know invoice finance is not cheap. A letter of credit from the bank's not cheap. So then you cut in your margins, and then you sort of. So I mean, he has done something I suggested, which is he now sells some products direct to market on Amazon. Because I
mhm.
said, this is your problem. I mean, I had a very honest conversation with him. I said, I really like your business. It's 40 odd years old, but this is the problem, your cash flow. And I said, for anybody to walk in and buy this, it's not just about acquiring your business, it's about them having significant deep pockets to maintain this period where you have negative cash flow.
The one I was looking at that was really heavily towards that Thanksgiving to Christmas, I said, "Pick 1 or 2 products that do well through the entire year, something
Mm,
reoccurring, something people
mm,
use and have to replace."
mm,
And or they buy multiple of, because his product was kind of a gift related product. I said, "It still can be gift, but do something in a passion niche like golf or fishing gear, something that people buy year
mm,
round and use a lot of,
mm,
and then that'll even some of that out." And I don't know where he's at. I was looking at a deal for a friend who was gonna give me equity
mm.
for helping him negotiate the deal type of thing. I do that a lot where, I'm coming in as just a partial because I'm doing some oversight for them. But yeah, a lot of these businesses, they just don't get that. Their cash flow matters, not only just like their EBITDA or whatever at the end of the year, the cash flow cycle, the cycle of money coming in and out of the business is important to look at.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that you couldn't acquire that business for 10 months of the year because it's negative. And
Mhm.
even the 2 months where all the money came back in, you're still juggling the balls for the next financial year. So that's the problem. I mean, you did take my advice, but I mean, I don't know whether you find this, Ronald, but I find a lot of the time when I'm speaking to sellers, I'm actually coaching them through the realities. And sometimes I feel like a bit like the Grinch. I mean, I got, last week I got referred three brilliant businesses. If you looked at the top line, there was one revenue who was doing 14.5 million euros, had some blue chip clients, but he'd lost 3.5 million because he just wasn't, he had some very experienced staff and he just wasn't controlling the costs. And then he turns around to me and says, well, I want 10 million for this. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure what I'm buying.
So it's interesting as I approach it a little different. One of the things we do is I don't talk about price right off the bat. Matter of fact, I don't bring it up until they do most of the time. I'm more
Yes.
interested in where is the owner trying to get, right? So
Yes.
what are they trying to accomplish? And if one of them says, I'm trying to, a lot of times it does come up. I'm trying to retire. Cool. What does that look
Yeah.
like? I need $2.5 million for retirement. And they don't get that. And they don't make the connection that what they need for retirement has no relation whatsoever to what their business
Oh,
is
I
worth.
hear that
Right.
all the time as well, Ronald. Yeah, absolutely. Is they bring up, well, I need X amount for retirement. Well, that's wonderful, but unfortunately, your business doesn't support that sort of figure. And I think that's the harsh reality sometimes. I mean, I think it's sad in this day and age when we've got lots of baby boomers in both the US and the UK that are looking to, they're now in their 60s, 70s, 80s, looking to exit. And to me, there's lots of bad advice on different advice they're getting, whether they're turning to their accountant or their seasoned lawyer who really doesn't know about M&A and will tell you, well, this business has got a great USP. Okay, well, what is it? why am I paying 5 times what somebody else is, in the industry? Well, it's because it's got USP. Or to me, and I do work with some of the business brokers, certainly in the UK, I think should be named listing brokers because a lot of them seem to just put out a crazy figure and then say, okay, well, I've got a stack of buy. I know this because my brother recently sold his business, and he got hit up and hit up and hit up. And they said, "Oh, every day you're wasting, you're leaving 100,000 on the table. We've got buyers out our ears for your business." We know that. And
And
the figure they started with, they said they wanted 80,000 to list it. Then they went down to 50, then 35. So I kind of feel sorry for business owners in a way, particularly baby boomers that have worked so hard on their baby for decades, and suddenly like, oh, I'm being told I have to retire, or ill health, or I've just run out of energy, maybe. And the advice that's around them just isn't very good advice, unfortunately.
so I try a different approach, especially early on in the conversation before I have the full picture. Is when somebody says, "I need $2.5 million for retirement," my instant response before I know all the numbers or anything else is, "Cool, let's see how we can get you there." And the
Yeah,
reason I do that is a lot of times getting them there is like, "Hey, look," because it takes me as the villain away, and I become the guy that's helping them get there. It's like, a lot of times that's like, you need 2.5 million. Your EBITDA is 600,000. In order to get to $2.5 million in your pocket, we need to get your EBITDA to X, because the
yeah,
industry is paying 2.5 times for a company your size, or 3 times, or whatever the number
yeah,
is. And that's just the reality of things. And I'm not going to make a bad investment.
yes,
No, I
yes,
don't buy unique selling points. I buy, and I don't know a good seller that does, right? You might get a few strategic buyers who are doing acqui-hire, where they're buying, you're doing something so well, they want your employees. But
yeah.
usually to even get
Employers,
on,
customer list area, or the IP. We all know that. I mean, this is a conversation I had with this gentleman the other week because it was a digital agency type business, and I said the only way he was going to get sort of seven figures would be to sell the IP, and hope someone like a Google, a Facebook, or a PE thought, well, there's some value in the IP you've developed, and we're prepared to pay a premium because we can sell it on. But I said to him, I think he was doing, I think 200,000, and he wanted 20 million. He wanted for his business because he said, "Oh, me and my business partner have each put 10 million into this business, developing it over the last 7 years." And I said, "Well, that's great." But I said, "Unfortunately, your business doesn't support that." And as I say, I said, you might get somebody that's going to come along and they're going to pay a multiple seven figure if they think your IP is so great that they can do something with it. I mean, I know somebody that did very well from Microsoft buying the IP. They actually sold it back to him a few years later for $1 because they never used it, but that's a different story.
that happens more often than they want to admit.
Well, they don't care, do they? I mean, if you've got a Microsoft, it's a tax write off. If they do something with it, great. If they don't, carve it out and sell it back again, just
Yeah, there's the big boys like that. Sometimes they'll buy IP, just their intellectual property or software or something like that, just to keep other people from using it. Right, it's a
absolutely,
competitive advantage to take it off the table.
absolutely.
Um, the other side of getting somebody there is a lot of times what happens in my world, because I do, like you do, I do consulting. So a lot of times
Mm,
I say, "The way we're gonna, let's see how we can get you there." The end
mm,
package, the offer that's made is like, "Look, if you really like, your guy needs to get 20 million. If you really need to get 20 million, you're gonna have to get the revenue.
mm.
Let's say we can get you above $4 million in EBITDA, where the PE firms are starting to look at you and they may pay 6x." Right?
Yeah,
So in
yeah,
order to get to, even at 6x, we're still gonna have to get your EBITDA above, well, get 4, most of these things, the, PE don't even look at you until you're at 4 million in EBITDA, and at 6, if you can get them 6x at that, you're there, right?
yeah.
So,
That's exactly
but
the conversation I had, Ronald. I said
yeah.
that he needed to get a significant better EBITDA, and probably with 2 years trading at that, so that it attracted the PEs, the VCs, etc. Exactly as you're saying, basically. I said
And
that's
the
the reality.
fastest way to do that and the fastest way to do that is to work with a guy like you or me when we go acquire, companies that are similar, that we can tack on and build a customer base that we can cross sell, upsell, and
Absolutely,
add instant customers to us.
absolutely.
And so the conversation usually ends where, "Hey, I really need to get out. I can't go through that mergers and acquisitions thing." Like, cool. I can't promise you 2.5 million, but what I could do is I'll buy 75% of the company. I'm going to do at the current valuation. I'll leave 20% on
Yeah,
the table, 25% on the table. Here's the plan to get you closer to your exit number. That 25% could be worth closer to what you're wanting after we go through our
yeah,
process. and we've got deals done that way. Like I said, I'm usually a member of the team on those. The real trick on all these things is like you said, exit planning. What are some of the other lessons that you learned as far as making a business? I want the sellers to be listening to this. I want sellers to hear what are the process they need to go through to make themselves sellable to one of us. Hey there, Hot Exit family. Today I'm thrilled to talk about Snowball, our incredible new sponsor. This community is more than just an investment hub. It's a place where growth is holistic. A private community where top entrepreneur investors share private deal flow, wins, tough lessons, strategies, get advice, and so much more. Snowball is a network rich with like minded, experienced entrepreneurial minds, including investors, founders, CEOs, and doers, all dedicated to meaningful growth. Snowball threads are like a daily masterclass. This isn't just about financial success, it's about enriching your entire life. If you're looking for a community that supports your entire entrepreneurial journey with shared wisdom and collective support, check out www.snowballclub.com. I believe their approach to compounded growth in wealth, health, network, and relationships could be the game changer you've been seeking. Let's grow together with Snowball.
I think there's a few key areas. So finances need to be order. The other thing could be problematic is not enough customer spread. And what I mean by that is one customer taking 40 or more percentage of your revenue. Because what that will do, as you know, Ronald, is that most lending institutions will immediately discount you because they think it's too high a risk. You're too reliant on one client or customer. So that's something that you need to be aware of if you're planning the exit. Can you get more clients or customers so that you're not so reliant on a client or customer? Because as I say, the big lending institutions that buyers rely on, possibly to acquire a business, will walk away. They think it's too risky.
We had the same conversation with a guy who I'm trying to get on the show. We'll see if he ever comes on.
Hmm.
He's afraid to come on because he successfully made the acquisition and they have all these NDAs about talking about what they did. He bought a company that had I would say, a very lopsided customer base, meaning that there were 3 customers that made up like 65-70% of his in total revenue. Out of 30,
Mm,
the company only had about 30. They're doing 2 or $3 million
mm.
a year. They're doing, close to pretty profitable company consultancy type of thing, doing about 1,000,000 in EBITDA. And so I think they're running at 30 something percent gross margin. But that said, they the way he funded it is he realized that 2 of those 3 vendors that used him, they were a significant portion of their business, meaning that they did strategic stuff for them that would be hard for anybody else to step in and do. And they were
Okay.
big companies. So he just went to them and said, "Hey, I'm looking to buy this." The owner's wanting to
Yeah,
exit. They actually
yeah,
helped fund the transaction and they got minority stakes in the
yeah,
company because they needed it to stay around,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
that
there's
makes perfect sense. Obviously, yeah, it's yeah, helping each other. That's fine. But obviously, they obviously had a unique product or service that kind of they wanted them to stick around. But I say in most cases, people don't.
right.
And even if it's been a great customer or clients, I've seen it for 20 or 30 years. As we know, the lending institutes will say that's great, but we don't know that when it changed hands, this business, that customer client is not going to walk away. And if they walk away, then that's a problem for you. It's a problem for us, and therefore we're not going to lend. I mean, I guess the other thing that I come across, and you might do as well, Ronald, is overvalued assets. This is a big, a big
They always forget to
debate.
depreciate the value of the asset. They paid $10,000,000 for this, and that's what
Appreciated
it's worth
or
now. It's 30 years old. That piece of equipment's not worth that anymore, right?
no. And I always explain, hey, we can get a lend against these assets, but what the lenders are going to do is they're going to send somebody in that's very experienced and they're going to look at every bit of asset and they're going to work out the current market value. And we will get a loan against the current market value, not what you bought it for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago. It's
Yeah.
what it's worth today.
Yeah, I
I
had a We were looking at a heavy manufacturer. They made things, extremely heavy things, and they used big cat front
Ooh,
loader type of equipment. I'm talking huge ones, look like you would see on, like in a mining operation and stuff. They were giant forklifts and stuff, but they had to lift these big concrete pillars and stuff these guys made. And they're like, "Well," these guys like, "Well, that machine was 700,000 and that machine was 400,000." And I'm like, "That machine's 5 years old and that machine's 11 years old. These things
yes,
depreciate really quick, right?"
yeah,
And I said, "Here's what I want you to do." So every one of those, he basically said, "I've got 7,000 or $10,000 worth of machinery." I think, "I want you to," it was probably a dozen pieces or 2 dozen pieces of machinery. I said, "Take all of them, put them in a spreadsheet, and
yeah,
go look online, look at eBay and look at other places and look that you'll be amazed what find what they're actually selling for, right?
yes,
Ca
exactly.
call your broker that sold you the equipment, ask them what they give you a trade-in value for
Yeah,
those, and
yeah,
somewhere between what they're selling for and what their trade-in value is what this appraiser will come in and appraise that stuff at. It's nowhere near what
absolutely.
you think it is. Like I
Yeah,
said,
I mean,
this is
I
not he goes, "I don't think that's how it works." I said, "When you drive a car off the car lot, how much value do you lose?" He goes,
exactly,
"Thousands." I said, "The same thing
exactly.
happens when you drove that forklift,
Yeah,
that $700,000 cat front loader that they put a forklift things on. When you drove that off the lot over there, it dropped. It's no longer,
absolute
no longer shiny and new."
story, Ronald, about that actually. A few years ago, probably not actually pre-pandemic 19, I looked at a very good business. They made sort of widgets, for a better word. They made all sorts of bit of steel fabrication. And they had a big factory fire, unfortunately, a year previously. And the insurance had come in and they put these wonderful machines where they put the steel in one end, program it in, and it produced whatever you wanted. ATM, cash point, the bit where you put that was one of the things they produced in the sort of from hundreds to thousands. And he said to me, he said, "Oh, these machines were a million quid each. There was two of them." He
Mhm.
said, "So I want to sell a business, and I want you to give me a million quid for each of them." I said, "Well, hang on, it's huge, huge. They were probably, I don't know, 30 foot each. Huge, great things."
Mhm.
I said, "Anybody that wants to buy these, if you want to sell them, you've got to take your roof off your business because that's how I got it in. They've probably
Mhm.
got to be split in two. You've got to get them onto a load and shipped to somebody, and they're quite unique." So I said, "I appreciate that they were manufactured for you at £1 million a go, 2 million quid for both of them. But unfortunately, any appraiser comes in will take into fact, A, as you say, they're not brand new anymore, and B, to sell them off comes at some considerable cost." So I said, they're going to take all that into that. So, and I said, if you take those out of your business anyway, you don't have a business.
The other thing I come across is, especially in that same realm where equipment needs to be replaced, so they know they need to sell and they don't want to replace the equipment. And then you're looking at it like, just think of those two, million quid devices that needed, if he hadn't replaced them and he comes and he tries to sell you the company, you look at it and go,
Yeah,
those things are, if you really do your due diligence and realize that those pieces of equipment have to be replaced, now
yeah,
you have a capital expenditure you have to bring equipment in at 2,000,000. That still has to
yeah,
come out of the price. So a lot of times they go, "Well, I wish I'd have never bought those because then I wouldn't be in the hole." It's like, no, I would still have to calculate, you know,
yes,
that your business needed them to operate. One of us would have had to
yes.
buy them. It's still gonna come out of the bottom line.
It's amazing the stories you hear on. I mean, I
Mhm,
like you would probably look at. I mean, now I probably look at 300 to 400 businesses a year in
mhm,
terms of deep dive financials, etc. I remember one I went. I'll be very careful how I say this. About 5 years ago, I went to a wholesale bakery that was listed with a broker, a good broker that I knew. I went to see him. The bit I think was about 400,000, and I got there, and he said, "Oh, that isn't the real number." He said, "There's another 800 and something that goes under the table." He said, "It's great. Everybody works on cash." I went, "Oh."
yeah, there's a lot of that.
um,
Yeah,
Walking out of the business rather quickly, I said, "Well, here's a problem." I said, "When businesses change hand in the UK, certainly, that can trigger a government inspection." I said, "That might be a bit of a problem if suddenly we've gained all this money, or there's a big black hole in your accounts for the last 10, 20, 30 years." I said, "And I'm the owner of that business? No, thank you."
Yeah. I've seen them where the guy says, "Well, I have" if you look at his payroll, he's like, "I've got 13 employees," and I go in there and I'm taking a look around or something else happens. He shows me pictures of his, like, factory and stuff. A lot of times I just have him do a virtual tour because I'm remote
Yeah,
from him. I, like, take a
sure.
video and walk around, and I count, like, 25 people there, and I'm like, "Well, you're who are the extra 4 or 5 people that are in the factory?" Or, what I see you told me you had 3 people that work behind the counter. I seen 5. And he goes,
Yeah,
"Well, the other 2 guys only" like, this is a guy who sold radios and, did installation. They did they call it? They tinted windows and stuff. They were doing $5-6 million a year, fairly profitable
mm,
because they did all the car
good.
dealerships. And he goes, "Oh, the other 2 guys are the car tint guys you see, coming up to the register and paying or cashing out their customers." I was like, "Why are they
Yeah.
not on the payroll?" He goes, "Well, we paid them on a cash basis." I was like, "What do you mean?" "They take a commission off of everything they do." I was like, "Cool, why are they not on the payroll?" He goes, "No, no, at the end of the day, when we take the cash register down, they figure out what their sales worth a day, and they get paid every day on cash." I was like, "It still has to show in your accounting." So all he was showing on his accounting is his money he received from allowing them
Oh,
kinda rent the space out to put the windows in. I was like, "Yeah, that's" or I mean, to tint the stuff. And, it was under his brand, his company, everything else. These guys had no paperwork or anything, so it wasn't like they were renting space and subleasing from him or whatever. I was like,
no.
"Just not how this works," right?
Yeah,
And the reason you can sell some of this other stuff is people are coming in to get that stuff done and see the others. There are a lot of walk-in traffic that come in to get one business and selling the other. So if they leave, right,
mhm,
the other side of your business is damaged, and quite frankly, they made way more money than his other side of his business. Probably 2/3 of the money was coming in through the window tinting business because the guy there was all kinds of problems inside of this. I was like, ask when we
yes.
start talking about how he got his customers, he's a semi-pro golfer, and he's a
Okay,
golf pro for one of the local golf
yeah,
courses in the area, and most of his clients are car dealerships, so he basically gives them free lessons, walks them around, and now he gets
nice.
to tint all the windows for their cars. I was like, "Number 1, I
Yes,
don't play golf. How many of your customers like to fish too? Because I like to fish, but I wasn't
yes,
planning on going there and working every day like he was, but I'm just saying,
yeah.
the guy that replaces you that I put in as a general manager needs to be a golf pro is what you're telling me? That adds a level of complexity, to the whole
Kinda
picture here.
limiting the opportunity
Yeah.
somewhat.
Just for fun, the 3rd part of this one was I asked him, I was like, "Well, what do you really wanna accomplish here?" He goes, I'd stay around and do and still book sales and stuff for you guys. I'd just like to cut down the number of hours I'm working." I was like, "Okay, what does that look like? Cut down the number of hours. How many hours a week would you like to work?" He goes, "Man, 40 would be great." I was like, "Damn, dude, how many hours are you working?" He goes,
Yeah, that
70 to 80." And I said, "Okay, whoa, 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 stop. What roles are you doing?" It turns out he's doing, not only the sales, payroll, he's behind the counter half the time. He's there from an hour or 2 before a close until an hour or 2 after. He's going out, he considers all these trips where he's going out and taking people out on golf trips and stuff like that as part of those hours too. But I was like, "You didn't do your books," and it was just him, he had no broker. It's like, "You didn't do your books right." This is "Why?" "Because I have to replace you're wearing 3 hats minimum, maybe
yeah,
4, and 3 of those positions need to be paid 60 to $80,000 a year, right?
yeah.
Which you're not paid. You don't make enough to cover what you paid yourself in seller's discretion or earnings last year doesn't cover all those roles, right, that I have to replace because 'cause I'm not wearing all those hats, right?
I think that's
But
really common around. I've seen it a lot of times because they've sort of grown with the baby. They don't want to relinquish control, and they end up, as you say, doing a bit of HR, a bit of admin, a bit of accounting. And sometimes I say to them, "You've got no systems and processes in place, which is a problem because I've got to put it in place if I'm buying your business." And I said, "Really, you need to step back, at least so you've got one role, so that any buyer can see the fact that, okay, there's some people that are doing the HR, the admin, the accounting." I said, what I don't want, like you're saying, what I don't want to do is acquire a business and suddenly think, I've got to find 3 or 4 people, even before, as you say, the cost, and you start looking at the costing. And then you start to look at, okay, I've got to find those people. Okay, there's no systems and processes in this business. I've got to start putting it down. And I think a lot of business owners just don't get that. They say, "Oh, the good thing is I don't have a lot of management. I do everything myself." Well, no, as a buyer, that's not great because if you're walking out the door, then all those roles are walking with you, and we've got a problem.
Yeah,
and a lot of the time, a lot of the information is in their head. I mean, you probably see it all the time, and
I was
it's
gonna say
like,
the
well, that's
same thing,
great,
yeah.
but I need to know that information. What do you do? What do you do with the admin on a day-to-day basis? What do you do with the accounting? What's the HR look like? How does it work? Well, I know how it works. I say to you, well, which is great, but I say it's really got to be presentable to the buyer as a sort of pick up and run with it. The more problems from day one you're presenting, the less likely a buyer is going to A, think this is a great business to buy, or reach the figure that you hope to reach. It's just going to be a killer in many ways.
Do you find the same thing I find in that a lot of times if you walk through a either on paper or a mental org chart, there are people that are not on payroll other than the owner doing a lot of the tasks. There's a brother-in-law doing financings, or my dad's brother, my uncle is the attorney,
Oh, I'm
or
laughing with
my
you,
wife's
Ronald.
doing the
I've
accounting,
seen it.
right?
I've seen it. Oh, I looked at another wholesale bakery where they were doing seven figures. It dropped, and it really wasn't very profitable. And had a conversation with him, and his payroll was crazy. I mean, it was. I think it was doing something like revenue about 600,000, but they had 400,000 in payroll. And I said, "What's the payroll?" Oh, well, my sister works here, my brother works here, my auntie works here, my cousin works here. I'm like, oh, what do they do? Well, they like working here. Well, I'm sure they do. And not only were they working there, but he was paying them way over what the equivalent job would pay working for somebody else.
And if you look at that, you can look at it one of 2 ways. I can either come in and fix all of that, but the problem is you lose, let's say it's got 50 employees and 10 of them are family. You don't
Yeah,
lose the 10 family members, you lose the 10 family members and everybody they were close to that are mad that you lost the 10 family members. A lot of people don't understand. They think too logically. They go,
yeah,
"Okay, there's a little bit of nepotism going in here. There's 6 people that, are connected to the owner. They may or may not stay anyway. They're overpaid. I will replace them." They don't
yeah,
realize those 6 people are connected to 3 each, so there's 18 people impact. There are 3 people, for almost every person in a company that somebody's close enough to that is either
yeah,
gonna be impacted to the point where they're not performing as well, or absolutely leave if you let somebody
yeah,
go, right?
yeah,
And it's gonna take
yeah,
some turnaround. Then there's gonna be I always say there's at least 1 or 2 people that if you let them go, the whole company works better and they're all happy and they actually
yeah,
become more productive because they think the owner should have got rid of them 6 months ago. There's always those guys there too. But, there's a little bit of I always think that kind of a humble thinking, like, who am I to think I can come in here and run this company better than you did? You've been running it for 30 years. And a lot of
yeah,
business owners don't think that, or buyers don't think that way. They think they're going to go in on day one and make a list of changes. And I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous to go into something you don't know. Nothing that's built organically over 30 years is built logically,
no,
right?
no,
There's a thing of, what's logical now in today's day and time wasn't logical 30 years ago. The same
no,
tools and same systems and processes and things that could be done now weren't available. Like, that's one of the risks we all run is we just wanna run in there and start changing things so we think we can do it better, and I use that as a little bit of
it's
ego
changed
check.
too
Who am
quick.
I to think I could do something better than you've been working on for 30 years?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean yeah, that is true. I think we all are guilty of that at times. As you say, that the fundamentals of a business that's been running decades it's a good fundamental because they wouldn't be here if not. So it's
Right.
about tweaking it rather than, as you say, running in there and trying to change everything at once. So I mean, I tend to work on a sort of 90-day program where once I'm in the business, I do another deep down on the dive on the costings, and the other side, obviously, marketing and how they're getting out there. I mean, the security business, we realised a guy, nice guy, nearly 70, been working the business for 40 years, very successful. But he was persuaded to get a website by one of these people that were monitoring it and doing all sorts of fun. And he was paying, I think it was 1,000 or was it 1,500 a month just to host a website, a static website that really, it was there just as a presence. They didn't really get any traffic from. So I'm like, wow.
Something you
He
I
just
could
didn't
put together for
understand it.
19.95 a month,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. He just didn't understand it. I mean, it was. they were doing that, and then they were selling a domain. His domain was about £200 a year, which I say is kind of going back a decade for me. But he just didn't understand it. He thought, right, I need to have a website. These guys sort it all out for me. Great. But as I say, it was just, so we immediately saved sort of, I think it was £20,000 first year just by moving it.
And I still get pitched those guys come to me sometimes like, "Hey, you need another website? Like, we'll do it. We'll build it out for 10 grand and we'll maintain it for 1,500 a month, and it's on our custom platform that only we could ever do." And I was like, "Yeah, 99% of websites out there, especially static ones, can be done off of some form of WordPress, which I can get for free
Yeah.
as software and host for
Yeah.
29.95 a month on a decent hosting
Yeah.
service. I'm not interested. Maybe I'll pay you a grand to format it, set it up, and stuff my content in it, but other than that, I
Yeah.
don't need you." But I'm also a
Yeah.
tech
Yeah.
nerd from previous trade, right? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's what you don't know. He realized that he needed a presence because the type of clients he was getting approached by, and they wanted to see him have a web presence. He didn't really
and
understand it, so they were solving his problem, but just at quite a high cost.
I've seen one of those, and one of the problems we had is, like, they had a 5-year contract with him too, right?
Oh,
And I was
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
"Okay,"
yeah.
5 years left on the contract, and I'm like, "You
Yes.
signed a
Yeah, yeah,
5-year
yeah.
contract." You know what technology does in 5 years? Like, it just doesn't logically make sense to me that we'd ever sign any kind of software or technology contract for 5 years. I think
Mm.
from this second right now to 2 years, we won't recognize what technology looks like
Moving
today
all the
with
time.
with what AI is doing and how fast it's moving, right?
No,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, I say when I was first online, it was kind of the where you got a line of text and you could go and have a coffee for 10 minutes. And do you remember the old beeping noise as it downloaded everything? And
my
oh my goodness.
Okay, so let's go back to mergers and acquisitions. Let's talk about we're close to the top of the hour here. Let's talk about what are you doing now and how can people work with you and kind of what are you looking for? What's your current what's your current career look like? What are you up to?
Yeah, I'm helping people grow via acquisition. A lot of people don't understand, as I say, they think to grow their business into a group, they have to have significant monies to
Hmm.
buy other businesses, whether that's competitors and they're going horizontal, or maybe they want to go vertical and buy their suppliers. And that's kind of what I'm helping businesses do at the moment is grow quickly via acquisition, explaining to them that we can add six figures, seven figures via acquisition by looking to acquire. And certainly in the UK at the moment, it's a good time to acquire. I was reading a report where that they reckon I think there's 2 million businesses, official or unofficial, will be coming to market this year, particularly from the baby boomers who started in the 70s and 80s. So it's a great time to sort of look at those businesses and see can we grow via acquisition rather than organically? And I think it's the fastest way to grow. I was listening to Gerald Ratner, which is he had the biggest jewelry chain in the UK, Ronald, and he grew via acquisition. Never spent a penny out of pocket. He grew a business, I think that originally had 300 stores, retail stores, outlet. This is in the sort of 90s. To, I think at their peak, they had 3,500 stores just by merging and acquiring competitors. And he acquired them strategically with some share swaps and agreements, but it never cost him or his company a penny out of pocket to acquire them.
And it can be done. It happens all the time. The big guys do it, and us medium or little guys here. I don't know if I consider myself. I'm a pretty good size guy, but in the realm of
Me
mergers and
too.
acquisitions, yeah, in the realm of mergers and acquisitions, I would be considered a small fry.
Yeah.
You can do these low cost transactions, so you can get creative. There's ways to finance things that don't come necessarily out of your pocket. I'm not a
Working
big
a
fan.
solution that works for everybody, isn't it, Ronald? What does the seller want? As you say, what's the number? Can we get there? Can we structure a deal that works for them and us? It's always about thinking, how can we get a deal where everybody walks away, where we acquire the company, they walk away happy. That's the main thing. But as I say, I think it's a great time to look at M&A and people sort of really understand the fact that it isn't just for the PEs, the VCs, the globals, the nationals, the Fortune 500 companies that have got deep pockets. This is for your businesses on the street, that the mom and pop businesses that can still grow via acquisition and quickly.
I agree. I think if a lot of people think they need the big wallet, they need to raise a fund of multi-millions. I would say you need one of the things, right? Either you need a lot of money or you need to have knowledge. If you look at I would back somebody that has knowledge and tenacity over somebody that has money. It's really easy to fail with a lot of money. You could be a multimillionaire, go out and buy a company and just miserably fail. To where if you have the knowledge of mergers and acquisitions, you have the knowledge of running a business, and you have the tenacity, somebody who would be on the financial scale fairly broke could probably have more
Yeah.
success in this realm than somebody who
That,
has money but no experience or
that
not at
reminds me of
least
a
not.
conversation I had last week, Ronald, actually. Sorry to cut across you. A gentleman that's approached me, and he was telling me a story of about 15 years ago in Ireland where he had done very well and he spent his life savings, I think it was 150,000 euros, buying a barber shop. And he didn't get any legal advice. He acquired this barber shop. And the next day, the guy set up a new barber shop about 4 doors down, took the staff, the customers, and he was left thinking, well, what have I bought? Because he thought that was the way it worked. A gentleman's handshake, exchange of significant money. Well, not, for him. And just, I said, well, it was obviously a bare minimum. He didn't get a non-compete. He said, oh, no, I didn't bother with any of that.
Yeah, he bought the guy out of his lease is what he bought.
Yeah, exactly.
Guy
Yeah,
was trying to
I
get a
was
better
like, wow.
facility and just, couldn't get out of his lease, and he thought, "I'll just sell the whole thing and move." Yeah, those come up. You gotta watch for those. I've had people tell me, like, "I wanna sell this," and I was like, "Oh, cool. What are you gonna do next?" "Well, we don't need to talk about that. It's not relevant." "Yeah, it is kinda relevant, right? Because you understand that when we do this, I'm gonna have you sign all kinds of legal agreements,
Yeah,
and that says you're not gonna compete with me, right?" You go, "I ain't
yes,
signed anything like that." And I'm like, "Okay, we're done here." 'Cause
yes,
they're people, but they do this. They think, "My wife wants to move 40 miles away. I'm just gonna set up shop over there." Well, depending on the business, especially in today's climate, people can order stuff online and everything. They could take a
yeah,
lot of that customer base with them, and they intend on it, right? They've already downloaded and have their Rolodex, in their phone and on their personal computer. They have that Excel spreadsheet that has all their customers on it. They think they're gonna go over to the shop and just
yeah.
start shipping things to people instead of having them come and pick it up at the office. Yeah, you got maybe somebody will buy this, but it ain't me. So,
No,
right?
no, it's a shame, being around business owners and chatting to them and chatting to people that are interested in selling a business. You hear these horror stories, unfortunately. And I think that's why it's so important that if you are looking to buy or sell your business, you are taking professional advice or someone that knows what they're doing to protect your interests.
Yeah, I always joke around and say due diligence happens 100% of the time, every single time. It either happens before you sign a check and send them the money, or after you own the asset and you start working in it. You're gonna learn everything about that company at some point. It's just better to do it prior to actually stroking a check and signing contracts. So, how do people
Yes.
reach out to you? How do they get a hold of you? How do people work with you?
Yeah, sure. I've got a website, richardtunnah.com. Simply reach out on there and I'm happy to have a confidential chat, and we can take it from there.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate having you here today. I learned a lot. We had fun. Thank you for being here and hang out for just a second. We'll call that a show.
Thank you.
I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between 5 million and 30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT-enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.